Usually building a championship sports team is, well, it's supposed to be simple addition, like a predictable math equation.
Right. You just plug in the variables.
Exactly. You hire ADRIAN Newey, literally the most legendary aerodynamicist in the history of the sport. You put Fernando Alonso, this ruthless, proven champion, in the cockpit. You bring in Honda as your works engine partner, and you back it all up with Lawrence Stroll's completely bottomless billion-dollar bank account.
Yeah, you add those up.
You add those variables together, and the result should be total paddock dominance.
I mean, on paper, it's a dynasty. It's the kind of project that should have the Mercedes and Red Bull pit walls absolutely terrified.
Oh, completely.
But, F1 doesn't happen on paper, and right now, that billion-dollar math equation is completely shattered.
Shattered is almost an understatement, honestly. Because today we are diving into the absolute crisis unfolding at Aston Martin right now during this 2026 Formula One season.
It is a mess.
It really is. And our mission for this deep dive is to take a magnifying glass to a team that has, unlimited resources and superstar talent, yet is somehow languishing 4 seconds off the pace. We've pulled some incredible internal telemetry and deep paddock intelligence to figure out exactly how this happened.
Yeah, we are going to unpack the cascading technical failures, the psychological collapse happening on the factory floor, and the incredibly toxic power struggles happening behind closed doors at Silverstone right now.
And you listening to this, you really need to understand this. Because it's a case study in what happens when ambition vastly outpaces operational maturity.
Oh, totally. Throwing money at a problem works in a lot of industries, but, in modern Formula One, if your underlying corporate structure is fractured, the budget cap and the technical regulations they will expose you instantly.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's look at the baseline reality of the AMR26 itself, because before we get into the boardroom drama, we have to understand why this car is essentially a tractor.
A very expensive tractor.
Right, and it's a dual nightmare. Let's start with the power unit. Honda took that infamous 2-year development hiatus after 2022, and, well, it seems like that pause completely derailed their 2026 architecture.
I'd argue it did way more than derail them. It effectively reset their entire baseline.
Wow, really?
Yeah, think about it. While Mercedes and McLaren were relentlessly iterating their combustion concepts and energy recovery systems, Honda's project was basically on ice.
Right.
Now, to their credit, they have solved the catastrophic reliability issues we saw in winter testing.
Oh, those were brutal.
Yeah, those violent harmonic vibrations that were literally tearing the carbon fiber apart on the dyno, they've mapped those out. But the harsh reality, and Shintaro Oriara basically admitted this trackside at Suzuka, is that the engine's performance ceiling is completely tapped.
Tapped, like nothing left.
Nothing. There is no hidden engine mode. There is no extra deployment to unlock. They're at the absolute limit, and that limit is nowhere near the front.
And the worst part is they're trapped because of the FIA's ADUO system.
Yes, the special development allowances.
Right, which are designed to keep one manufacturer from, ruining the show by being hopelessly slow. But the mechanism requires Aston Martin to just suffer through the first 6 races before the FIA even formally reviews the engine parity.
And the raw telemetry we have paints a really grim picture of that suffering. The numbers indicate Honda's deficit to the McLaren combustion engine is hovering over 4%.
4%? Are you kidding me?
I know. In a sport decided by thousandths of a second, a 4% power deficit means you are bleeding time all the way down the straights, and you are inherently compromising your tire life.
Because the driver has to overdrive the braking zones to compensate.
Exactly. Aston Martin can make reliability tweaks right now, sure, but they are completely forbidden from introducing actual horsepower upgrades until the FIA grants them that ADUO lifeline, and that's not until after race 6.
Which creates an incredibly murky blame game internally. And this is where the physics of it all just fascinate me.
Yeah.
So a Formula One car has a very specific aerodynamic window.
Right.
The floor and the wings are designed to generate maximum load when the car hits a corner at a target speed.
Yep.
So if the Honda engine is so anemic that Fernando Alonso is arriving at an apex, say 20 kilometers per hour under that target speed, doesn't that mean the chassis simply can't generate the intended grip?
Yes.
It feels like untangling headphones. How do the engineers even separate what is a pure engine deficit from what is a fundamental aerodynamic failure?
Oh man, that is the multi-million-dollar engineering problem right there. You see, Formula One cars are interconnected ecosystems. The floor relies on mass flow and velocity to seal the edges of the diffuser.
Right.
So if you arrive at a high-speed corner lacking that 20 kilometers per hour, the pressure differential simply isn't there. The car becomes light, the aero platform stalls or becomes really peaky, and the driver instantly loses confidence.
Wow.
So you get the situation where the factory engineers might be looking at their wind tunnel data saying, the chassis is fine, it just needs more entry speed.
While the trackside engineers are screaming that the car is undrivable.
Exactly. And we actually have the proof of this cascading failure in the raw telemetry traces. If we isolate the Suzuka S's.
Oh, that is such a brutal sequence.
Right, that incredibly demanding flowing sequence where engine power takes a back seat to pure aerodynamic platform stability. The AMR-26 is completely exposed there.
The Suzuka data is damning. I mean, when you compare Fernando Alonso's traces to Carlos Sainz in the Williams, it's night and day.
It's shocking.
In the S's, Alonso is hemorrhaging 3 to 4/10 of a second to a Williams.
And it's not just aerodynamic stalling either. The chassis is physically fighting him. Mechanically.
Wait, mechanically?
Yeah, look at the throttle trace. Alonso is physically having to lift off the throttle in high-speed transitions where Sainz is absolutely flat and planted.
Man.
Mike Crack has already admitted the AMR-26 is overweight, and you see the penalty of that mass in those changes of direction. The inertia literally pulls the car off the racing line.
And then you look at China, right? Entering that endless, tightening snail shell of turn one, Alonso loses another massive chunk of time because the front end just washes out. So the chassis is overweight, mechanically unstable, and aerodynamically inefficient.
Yeah, the Honda engine is just the anchor dragging it down even further.
What's fascinating here is that when a car's foundational concept fails that spectacularly on both the mechanical and power fronts, the stress of that failure doesn't just stay confined to the garage.
No, not at all.
It trickles directly down to the factory floor. And this is where the human cost of 2026 really comes into focus.
The psychological toll on the workforce cannot be overstated. The internal reporting describes the current atmosphere at the Silverstone campus as a show of horrors.
A show of horrors, which is just a chilling phrase to use for a corporate environment.
It really is.
But you have to look at what preceded it. The winter break in F1 is a total myth. It's a 247 sprint. We are talking about engineers and fabricators pushing 80-hour weeks.
Yeah.
There were rumors that management had to forcibly ban staff from sleeping under their desks or in their cars just to manage the extreme fatigue.
I heard that too.
They gave absolute blood, sweat, and tears to deliver this highly anticipated new era for the team.
And imagine the absolute devastation of that sacrifice. You burn yourself out for 4 months, operating on pure adrenaline and the belief that you are building a championship contender with Adrian Newey.
Right.
Then you show up to Bahrain, put the car on track, and realize within, 10 laps of FP1 that your entire design philosophy is fundamentally broken.
It's crushing.
It absolutely destroys a team's culture. Trust evaporates. Departments start pointing fingers at each other.
And the only thing keeping the factory from a total mutiny right now is the whisper of the SPEC B car and the Beta 2027 Honda engine.
The famous SPEC B.
Right. That is the life raft everyone is desperately clinging to. But the timeline on that overhaul is slipping drastically. Originally, this massive upgrade package was supposed to arrive for their home race at Silverstone.
Yeah, but now the internal word indicates it's been pushed back to Spa in July. Round 10. That means this exhausted workforce has to endure months of painful public failure on track with a car they already know is a dead end.
Wow.
They literally have to manufacture spare parts for a tractor while simultaneously trying to invent a completely new car in the background.
But see, I look at this Spec B will save us narrative, and I just don't buy it.
Really? Why not?
Let's say Aston Martin works a miracle. They show up at Spa. They bolt on the new side pods, the revised floor, the tweaked suspension, and they magically find a full second of lap time.
Okay.
The problem is F1's development treadmill. McLaren, Mercedes, Ferrari, they are not standing still.
No, they're not.
They are refining platforms they already understand. If Aston Martin finds a second in July, but McLaren finds 0.8 of a second just through standard incremental upgrades, Aston Martin is still miles behind.
You are absolutely right to challenge that optimism. And history backs you up. Look at Mercedes back in 2023 when they abandoned the zero-pod concept mid-season. They changed the car, but they spent the next 6 months just trying to understand the new baseline, while Red Bull was already adding performance to a mature concept.
Right.
In a new regulation era, the development curve is practically vertical. Gaining a massive chunk of time means nothing in isolation. Aston Martin doesn't just need to improve, they need an unprecedented development delta over Mercedes, McLaren, and Ferrari just to claw back to the midfield.
Which requires aggressive, decisive leadership. Here's where it gets really interesting. You need someone at the top willing to make brutal calls, restructure departments, and shield the factory from the media noise. But Aston Martin's executive suite is a ghost ship right now.
It's totally empty.
There's a massive leadership vacuum paralyzing the entire organization.
It is the single most destructive element of this crisis. A slow car can eventually be engineered into a fast car if the organization is healthy. But a slow car with no captain at the helm, that is how F1 teams completely collapse.
Take Mike Crack. He is sitting on the pit wall, technically functioning as the team principal, but the paddock knows he is a lame duck.
Oh, everybody knows.
The rumors are screaming that Jonathan Wheatley, the longtime sporting director from Red Bull, has already signed the contract to replace him.
But Wheatley is trapped in gardening leave.
Right.
In F1, you can't just resign on a Friday and walk into a rival factory on a Monday with a USB drive full of Red Bull's structural secrets.
No, you sit on the sidelines.
You sit on the sidelines, legally barred from communicating with your new team for months.
Leaving Aston Martin completely directionless by design. Think about the operational reality of that. If you are a department head at Silverstone, why would you execute a massive restructuring plan ordered by Mike Crack when you know Jonathan Wheatley is going to walk through the door in 6 months and probably fire everyone and bring in his own people?
You don't.
You don't. You put your head down, you protect your own job, and you wait. The team cannot build a new culture because they are frozen in corporate purgatory.
And nature abhors a vacuum.
Oh boy, does it.
When official leadership is paralyzed, back-channel rumors and billionaire power grabs fill the void. Which brings us to the most explosive dynamic currently tearing through the paddock. The rumor that Christian Horner is maneuvering to buy shares or orchestrate a full takeover of Aston Martin.
When I first heard that chatter, it felt like a hallucination. But you have to trace the money. Lawrence Stroll has poured an astronomical amount of personal and investor capital into this project.
Billions.
State-of-the-art wind tunnel, a campus that looks like a James Bond villain lair, the NEWEY contract, the Alonso salary.
Right.
The cash burn is staggering.
Yeah.
And instead of fighting for wins, the asset's on-track value is depreciating. So the theory is that Horner comes in, backed by private equity, to relieve Stroll's financial bleeding while taking total control of the team.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it makes financial sense for Stroll, perhaps. But operationally, it is a detonator.
How so?
Because if you insert Christian Horner into the Aston Martin ecosystem today, the resulting blast radius takes out the only valuable assets the team actually has left.
Yeah. Exactly. Let's start with Adrian Newey.
Oh, yeah.
The greatest aerodynamic mind in the history of the sport just fought a highly public, highly stressful internal war at Red Bull. By all accounts, his relationship with Horner fractured beyond repair.
Completely broken.
Newey negotiated his exit, took the massive payday at Aston Martin, specifically because he was promised autonomy and an escape from corporate politics.
Right.
So if he sits down at his drafting table in Silverstone and Christian Horner walks in as the new CEO, Newey probably walks right out the back door.
He absolutely would. You do not spend tens of millions of dollars to acquire a generational genius, only to immediately hire the exact manager that drove him away in the first place.
It makes no sense.
But the friction goes even higher than Newey. It goes straight to the owner. Lawrence Stroll is the ultimate dictator. He operates with total unilateral authority.
And he didn't buy this team to be a passive investor. He bought this team to build a championship machine for his son, Lance Stroll.
Precisely. And that is the immovable object meeting the unstoppable force. Christian Horner does not do power sharing.
No, he doesn't.
If Horner brings in investment and takes the reins, he will demand a ruthless meritocracy. That means total control over the driver lineup. It means the very real possibility of firing Lance Stroll.
Wow.
Would Lawrence Stroll, a man whose entire foray into Formula One was motivated by advancing his son's career, ever hand the keys to an executive who might immediately sack him?
I can't see it. It's a billionaire ego clash of epic proportions playing out while the mechanics are desperately trying to fix a car that is 4 seconds off the pace.
It's wild.
So what does this all mean? The collateral damage of all this toxicity ultimately falls on the shoulders of the guy strapped into the cockpit. Let's talk about Fernando Alonso.
Man, the internal talk characterizes his current mindset as putting on a masterclass in patience.
Which defies everything we know about his history.
Right.
I mean, he is 44 years old.
Yeah.
Most drivers are a decade into a broadcasting career by that age. His contract expires at the end of this year. He does not have time for a 3-year rebuilding project, yet he isn't throwing his helmet in the garage. He isn't screaming on the radio.
No.
He is reportedly completely laser-focused on diagnosing the suspension geometry and fixing the AMR-26.
It is a remarkable display of discipline, but it also underscores the terrifying leverage he holds over the team. Aston Martin desperately needs Alonso, far more than Alonso needs them.
Yeah.
Look back at 2023, he dragged that car to 8 podiums. He practically willed the team to relevance through pure racecraft.
He really did.
If you remove Alonso's superhuman tire management and defensive driving from the equation over the last 2 years, Aston Martin's underlying performance looks remarkably like a lower midfield backmarker.
So if he decides he's had enough of the boardroom drama and the overweight chassis, and he just walks away in December, who replaces him? Who actively chooses to jump into a burning building?
Well, this is where the wider driver market comes into play, and specifically the shadow of Max Verstappen.
Ah, the Verstappen sabbatical rumor.
Right. There is serious weight behind the idea that Verstappen is deeply frustrated with the current state of F1 politics and the 2026 engine regulations across the board.
He's been pretty vocal about it.
Very vocal. If he genuinely takes a year away from the sport, it creates a fascinating domino effect. Let's say Christian Horner does manage to win the power struggle and take over Aston Martin.
Okay.
Horner and Verstappen are incredibly loyal to each other. Suddenly, you have a very clear pathway for Verstappen to return from his sabbatical in 2027 or 2028 and step right into the Aston Martin seat.
Reuniting Horner, Verstappen, and potentially Newey if he doesn't quit, under the British Racing Green banner. That is insane.
On paper, again, it looks like a dream team. But this raises an important question for everyone listening. Think about what that culture actually looks like behind closed doors right now. Aston Martin is suffering a massive identity crisis.
Right.
They have the budget, the wind tunnel, and the facilities of the Mercedes-Brackley-era dynasty. But internally, they are still operating with the maturity of their former identity Force India.
Oh, that's a great point.
Force India was a scrappy underdog team that survived by punching above its weight. You cannot just scale up an underdog mentality with $1 billion and expect it to function like a world champion.
Right.
Throwing unlimited cash and famous names at a problem is useless if the executives, the owner, and the engineers are all pulling in opposite directions to protect their own egos.
It is the stark difference between a functional, cohesive team and a very expensive collection of talented individuals. And right now, Aston Martin is just a collection of individuals pointing fingers at each other.
Exactly.
Okay, we need to bring this all together. To summarize the sheer scale of the crisis we've unpacked today, Aston Martin is fielding an AMR-26 that is failing on every physical metric. It is compromised by a tapped-out Honda engine that cannot be upgraded until July, and an overweight, mechanically unstable chassis. They have an exhausted factory workforce suffering from plummeting morale, clinging to the hope of a SPEC B car that keeps getting delayed.
It's brutal.
And overseeing all of this is a paralyzed executive suite trapped by gardening leave, lame duck leadership, and a looming power struggle between billionaire owners and rival team principals.
It is a systemic failure from the boardroom all the way down to the contact patch of the tire.
It really is. You know, thinking about all this reminds me of how a piano works.
A piano.
Yeah. In music theory, there's actually no such thing as a bad note. If you hit a harsh, dissonant key, its ultimate value is entirely determined by the note you play next.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
If the following note resolves the tension, that harsh sound was actually a vital structural part of a masterpiece.
That's a great analogy.
Aston Martin's 2026 season is without a doubt a terrible dissonant note. It is physically and financially painful to watch. But the ultimate question for you to mull over as you watch them struggle through the rest of this calendar is this. Is this agonizing season just the necessary, painful setup for a beautiful, championship-winning chord in 2027 when the new factory, the new boss, and the Newey design finally gel? Or is this simply the sound of a billion-dollar super team finally collapsing under the sheer weight of its own unearned ambition?